Okay, so we are live now, I think, which is awesome. So glad we got over those technical issues there. So for anybody who is just joining, thanks for your patience while we got the live stream figured out. And I'm really excited today to host a conversation about change management practices in construction with my fellow speakers, Mattias and Dima. So we'll start off with a quick round of intros. I'll kick it off first. So my name is Erin with Erin Consulting. I've been in the construction tech space for a little while now and have my own consulting practice where I support both contractors as well as technology startups in AEC. So I'll pass it off now to, let's say, Dima to give a quick intro.
Yeah, honored to be here. My name is Dima Syrotkin. I'm the CEO of a company called Pandatron, where we support corporations with change management with the latest and greatest AI tools. Yeah, Matthias.
Oh, thank you. That was snappy and good. So my name is Mattias. I'm in charge of leadership development for the construction company Skanska, perhaps known in some of the words represented here in this live stream. So besides that, I'm also in charge of the Swedish ISO technical committee for human resource management. So I'm the convener, and that means I represent Sweden when it comes down to good practices for human resource management. So how good does that fit, Dima, today? Yeah, well, Erin, so pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining. And to kick off the conversation today, there's so much that encompasses, construction and change management, but let's just start with definitions. What is change management? Because it can mean a lot of things, right? So for each of you, both Dima and Mattias, how do you define change management?
All right, I guess I can start. I think fundamentally, one way to think about it is strategy execution. So imagine that you have a strategy as a company, right? You have certain goals. Sometimes it can be tactical. Let's say we want to change a certain systems. Sometimes it can involve changing the way you work that enables you to get to that strategy. And change management is exactly that. Like, how do we move from point A to point B that enables us to achieve our goals? In practice, I think the most common types of change would be digital transformation, right? So many companies go through installing ERP systems or going to cloud from on-prem. And even though it sounds like digital and it's just, well, install a new system, what's the big deal? There's actually a big cultural, behavioral component there of how do we bring people on board? How do we explain to them why that matters? And how that's going to impact the company at large. And other examples would be agile transformation, where you used to have separate departments for everything, and now you bring people to multidisciplinary teams, which are working a lot faster, but also it completely changes the power dynamic. And then just to mention some other examples would be sales excellence, right? When you are reworking the way you sell your product, it can be innovation culture, where you're like, how do we enable our people to think more long term? How do we enable them to come up with different ideas? So fundamentally, it's how do we change behavior, culture, mindset of typically thousands of people at scale to facilitate the strategy execution. And one last thing I would say is that when I meet people in either technology companies like Google's and Facebook's of the world, or very small companies, let's say, well, very small, like comparatively, let's say under 500 people.
Like Erin Consulting.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you could say that's already a very large company, but like relatively speaking, they often have never heard of change management. And that's because that problem doesn't really exist at a smaller scale, or when you're a very young company, like 20 years old, being relatively young again. For Facebook, they just haven't had enough legacy yet. And there's still like the same founder who started the company, still the CEO. There's a lot of kind of continuity. There's not a lot of legacy yet.
Got it. And I want to come back to that point of agile, that concept. But before we do, Mattias, do you want to share, your definition and thoughts on what is change management?
Change management is hard. change management is a challenge, and is also why we the way we define it is when you implement new practices and actions to achieve new results.
Okay.
And hopefully, according to, first of all, the best way to operate on a construction site, for instance, is to maintain the quality issues and also maintain the process that you're undertaking for the good sake of the client and the construction in question.
Right.
But mainly new practices that achieves new results. And if you've done the same practice over again, and you're not satisfied with the results, and I mean results we build the physical part of the society, but sometimes we look into that the physical part looks really good. Mostly it does when we're done, finished. But sometimes people has sort of met challenges on the way, so they're not that particularly happy. They might have aching backs. They might not be that keen on working on the next project, and that is really bad for us. So we need to have people, managers, and employees that are really happy after we deliver what we're supposed to deliver. So that's one of the results that we were looking for to improve. Actually, it's an ongoing process, but we can still improve.
Yeah. So new practices to have new results. I love that it's simple and really communicates it. It reminds me of the phrase, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So, of course, we're going to have to change something to get a new outcome. 100%. So, is there a specific like model or framework? So we talk about doing something new. How do you know how to get to those new steps? So, you know, is there something that our audience members could reference that can help them facilitate change management in their organizations?
Yeah, there's things that are, let's say, basics in the industry. So maybe I can introduce one. But yeah, if you're new to change management, maybe you haven't heard of ProSci. So it's an organization that's, you know, one of the most famous in terms of certifying change management practitioners, and they're kind of developing their frameworks. And the most famous framework that they've developed is called ADKAR. It's ADKAR. And it essentially stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And I would say that it definitely doesn't always flow that way, that nicely, and often you jump between kind of steps in practice. But the idea is that, you know, you start with awareness. You bring people into knowing why this is actually important and what's happening and what is going to happen. Then you bring them to that part of desire, right? How do we actually engage them and make them see what's in it for them and what's in it for their company as well? Like why should they even care about it? Then there's a step with the knowledge, right? It's important to equip the employees because often, you know, we can't just jump from one way of operating to the other overnight. We need to know like what are the skills we need to do to have like, you know, how to actually use those new tools and processes. And those three steps, awareness, desire, knowledge, are kind of what's called the enablement zone, right? And then the later two are what's called the engagement zone, where there's ability, right? So you actually practice what you learned. And that's very important because when you think about training, there's a big problem with learning transfer. We often don't practice what we learned. We kind of go for the weekend-long training and then nothing happens afterwards.
Yeah.
And then the final step is reinforcement, right? So people think that like, okay, we have this, I don't know, 3 months, 1 year, 5-year project, and then it's done. Typically, it's not done, unfortunately. And if you don't reinforce those habits, if you don't reinforce those behaviors, they're gonna, you know, fall by the wayside, and people are gonna retreat to using the old system, or they're gonna retreat to kind of using I don't know, old values, old processes. and you need to enforce that and kind of troubleshoot that. And yeah, and it's an ongoing process. So that's not so much the new thing, but that's kind of just the basics of how, I guess, traditionally we think about change management.
Yeah, ADKAR. So in my mind, I'm like, I need to come back to this and write down some notes. It's really good stuff, especially, from my experiences in construction, that enforcement piece too is super, super hard because I think teams do a fairly good job about, trying to get people on board with something new, but and people will be interested, right? If you have, an innovative mindset that's on the team and a good culture there. But a lot of times they'll say, I just don't have the time to see this through to the end. And they need that last bit of like encouragement to say, okay, well, we actually really do have to do this. It's super important. It's going to improve everything and our operations, et cetera. So also a note for the audience out there, we will be dropping some links and resources afterwards into the chat. So there will be a recording. And then if anybody has questions, comments, any thoughts as we're going through the discussion, please, please, please feel free to drop those thoughts into the comment box. And I will be able to grab those comments and ask questions out loud and then basically be able to interact with you guys directly. So please use that comment box there. And I see a couple people already posting ADKAR in the chat, so that's great. Love the learning, sharing that's going on here. So moving on to Mattias and your experience in Skanska, are there any specific frameworks? Is it the ADKAR one that you guys use for change management, or any other tools and processes?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the most important tool is people. So people is the people are bringing about change, and people are behaving or undertaking actions. So we have to make them sort of excited about the project. And ADKAR is on an individual level, a very, very important, very clear cut way to put on where are we at, what are we missing in these 5 different areas. If you miss out on one of them, you're not having the level needed to undertake the change or to understand the change as an individual, and that holds you back. So it's a really, really easy piece to start and start things going, and so the people are undertaking the changes. The most important person is, of course, the one behaving or undertaking action, but the one guiding or supporting or perhaps even coaching or demanding is the leader. So the leaders, all the managers, if you prefer to call them that, are managers are of course obliged to be leaders as well, and sometimes they manage. So here's another one, Erin, actually. So I don't know if this is a really, really good way to put it in English, but if I translate my Swedish leadership definition, I would say that leadership is the action you undertake when you get people to get along and come along to achieve the results asked for or aimed for, or just achieve results, because leadership can also, with this definition, be not that good.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have people to get along or come along, or if you get them to come along, but they don't achieve the results supposed to. I mean, in the small different steps in the construction, it's easy to see because it's you can measure it. You can make a photo of whether we've done it according to the instructions and the way it's supposed to look at, like in each and different stages. But then again, by the end results, if you look at that, that is, of course, the most important part, because you can get all the details right. And I don't mind having detail-oriented people in a construction business, because it's important to have those guys.
Absolutely.
But we also have other people that need to look at it on an overall picture and see, do we achieve the results besides the physical part of the construction site or the construction in itself? Do we achieve happy people with a happy client at the right amount of money they are paying or investing in this part? are people feeling good or bad afterwards? So we do have the both parts here. So it's super important to understand that leaders have people to come along and get along to achieve results.
Yep, it's really that qualitative piece about measuring success, and emotional intelligence plays a big role in that as well. It's one of my favorite things to share. It's one of those core skills that I really think the industry can definitely benefit from. So we do have one question here in the chat. So can you give us an example for real construction projects we can use this strategy on? And I can maybe share one from my experience, but I wanted to open up to you, Dima and Matthias, to chime in if there's any examples that are top of mind. So
put that question once again.
Yeah, so I think this is in reference to the framework, like ADKAR. How can you actually apply that to a real construction job?
I think this essentially is supposed to apply to any change management project, right? And the idea there is really to keep those steps in mind, or those possible avenues of engaging with people. Let's put it this way. So you need to think about, how do you announce the change, right? How do you explain the reasoning behind the change? How do you give employees the opportunity to ask questions about what you're actually doing? And that's the awareness stage, right? In the desire stage, you might gauge employees' reactions to the change, identify champions who could promote your cause, or if employees are resistant or indifferent, address their concerns and kind of show them that the change could benefit them personally. Then the knowledge side, I guess, is more or less self-explanatory. So see what are the skill gaps, try to address those, maybe design training programs or something else. With the ability, right? So there, actually, like what we do, I run essentially an AI coaching company. So if you're familiar with business coaching, executive coaching, so we support companies in applying things they learned in many ways, and in that change management execution, because coaching is a lot focused a lot on helping people set goals, follow up on them, reflect on kind of what went right, what went wrong, and that ability to practice after the training, I think, is essential to provide them some sort of tools, or can be managers, can be something else that is kind of reminding them to practice and really allowing them to do that, and reinforcing that. And then finally as well, like, how do you monitor the change afterwards? How do you use positive feedback, reward people for things that went well? And that's another thing where we also help kind of on the implementation side, where through those coaching conversations, we can then also see what's actually happening, what went right, what didn't, what are the systemic insights. So I think fundamentally it's not about like can we use it in, like, essentially this framework is supposed to be like broad enough to really be applicable for any change management project whenever you're changing process, culture, behavior, tool.
And I'll share one example out there from my experience, in the field, and this is applicable to think about any construction project, right? So, and I just thought of more than a few examples, but picking one, you're telling the team, okay, we're no longer going to do our daily reports on a paper form that needs to be scanned in. We're now going to switch to this digital format, and you're going to have to learn how to use an iPad or use your iPhone and open the app and input the data correctly. And here's why. So with that experience, I think that falls, perfectly into that ADKAR framework where earlier, Matthias, you mentioned, change management is hard. It's challenging. And that awareness piece is a really crucial first step with making it easier and less challenging. So you might be sitting down with, your foreman, your superintendents, any field users who are required to fill out daily reports, and say, okay, here's the situation, guys. Like, the paper reports are getting lost. We can't read the handwriting. The data gets lost. We are missing information. We want to make sure that we are able to automate this, be more efficient, have a digital copy in case anything comes up, we can easily pull the data, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, have that first step of why. And then you get to that, okay, what's in it for me? Oh, I can do my daily report like 10 times faster. And I'm making up numbers here, but you guys can get the concept. And eventually you get into training and support, implementation, and then hopefully you're in a cycle where now you have a team that's digitized on this process instead of not digitized at the end of the day. So that's maybe one example. And then we did have a nice comment from Rick Kahn in the chat. So, hey, Rick, thanks for coming to the conversation. Following up with your point, Mattias, about people, and I just wanted to share it here. So it's all about people, creating a safe place to bring forward ideas and how emerging technology can improve our processes and people experience. So that's definitely resonating. So thank Rick for sharing that. All right, so we're getting a lot of good questions here. And for any questions that we're not able to get to, we'll try our best to comment on them afterwards as well. So this will be posted on LinkedIn after the session is done. But I wanted to move on to the next topic. So earlier, Dima, you mentioned agile frameworks in companies. And for the audience we have here today, what the heck is agile? What does that mean? And then how do companies adapt and bring that into their organization?
Yeah, I think that's a whole other webinar. But let's say as a primer, you have a few interrelated concepts. So agile is one. You also have lean, for example. If I'm not mistaken, they started out in Japan, I think, in automotive industry initially. Toyota, if I'm not mistaken. And really the idea was a few things. Number one, so if you think about lean, a lot of it is how do we eliminate waste? What are the things that are actually not really that necessary? So if Elon Musk is a very kind of controversial figure, but having read his biography, one thing that he seems to be really good at is first deleting any parts in the production process that are not necessary before optimizing them. Because if you think about it, when you have a lot of legacy, you end up having a lot of this like parts and of the process, parts of, whatever it is, culture, behaviors, that actually they don't have to be there, but they're there just because of the legacy. And so a lot of the lean is like, okay, what are the parts we can delete safely? In terms of agile, I think one of the core ideas is how do we iterate quickly, right? How do we instead of having a year-long project and then find out at the end there was something that we did 9 months ago that was like fundamentally wrong and led to everything being kind of at threat right now in terms of delivery of the project, how do we like make this two-week sprints where we iterate and deliver something small, and then we sort of iterate further and we find mistakes earlier and kind of can fix them earlier. And I think that's where kind of agile comes, that it's sort of the idea is that you're kind of nimble and rather than kind of doing this waterfall where you're planning beforehand and you're trying to predict everything, rather than trying to predict everything, you would just respond and react kind of more in a more timely fashion. And the transformation that companies often do when they create those multidisciplinary teams is often connected to that, because if you want to react faster, it's helpful if you don't have to go between sales department and marketing department and production and operations and legal. If you had a team with all of this, 6 people, and then from each of those departments, and then they can do everything in one team, and the designer collaborates with the technician and the marketing person, a salesperson, and they design the product. So then they don't have to go to other teams to ask for other things. They can do everything jointly. And that tends to disrupt power in organizations when they go through these changes.
Absolutely. So thanks for sharing that. Maybe we need a part 2 on agile and how that works in construction companies, but we'll talk after. But anything to add to that, Mattias, as well?
Well, I can try. So, of course, we're running lean construction in Skanska, and we operate in 10 different countries. In Sweden, we have more than 1,000 sites and 16 offices only. There are 7,000 people working at those construction sites, and then we have 60,000 more coming from 10,000 companies assisting us to achieve the proposed results when it comes down to construction, building bridges, houses, or just mounting things. So that means that for us, we do have some digital things coming in. Of course, there's a bunch of things coming in. We introduced the Pandatron, for instance, to assist people to become even better and more aware managers and better leaders, and understand under what circumstances and conditions are they operating within. And we pretty soon we could discover a couple of things that helped us and the managers to be more agile. I mean, faster, more knowledgeable, doing more control and coordination in a swifter way to assist people to, let's say, mount windows in a new kind of a facade, or the facade that we've been using for many years. Not a single thing is proven until 20 years has passed in the construction business. Unless 20 years has passed, we're not sure whether the mounting of these windows in this particular facade will hold. That means that if we've done it in a couple of ways and we follow up on a regular basis, we're really agile if we within 5 or 10 years understand that we could mount these windows in another way. And we need to cascade that knowledge all over Sweden and to the rest of the sites in Poland, Hungary, Romania, UK, just to mention a few of the countries we're operating within. So we need to be sort of smart and agile to build on Dima's presentation, and that means that we need to be very clear in these before and after pictures, and so it is good to have these, before and after pictures. Before this new understanding, we mounted windows this way, all right, and now. From now on, starting today, we're going to mount them this way. So we have to be very, very particular about how to go about mounting those windows.
Sure. And the lean conversation and the agile conversation, it's reminding me, I read a little bit of a book called This is Lean, which was really helpful with understanding some of these concepts. So I'll also share a link to that in the chat. But jumping around to some of the questions that are coming in here, we have one that's asking, how does AI help in managing change? And I'll direct this one to Dima, since this is basically, Pandatron's expertise. Do you want to share a little bit about how AI helps with change management?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different things that different angles you could take towards utilizing AI. I know that actually Skanska has some like internal great projects. I talked to some colleagues of Mattias in the United States where they're tracking, how the construction is going and kind of monitoring that with the help of AI. I think a lot of people are currently realizing that we can actually equip our knowledge workers with kind of a ChatGPT-like tool where they can be faster, and those knowledge workers can be change managers, or it can be part of the training where the employees use the ChatGPT or ChatGPT-like tool to learn things quickly. What we're focused on is more around behavior and culture change. So what's interesting is that with this new technology, you can actually make certain old modalities very scalable. So what we do is what we call AI coaching, right? Like what I mentioned. And previously, you could never use coaching in change management because it was just too expensive. You couldn't really scale it to 10,000 people. It would be just crazy expensive because it would easily cost $250, $500.
Pausing there really quickly, Dima, and for the audience here, could you define AI coaching? Like, what is an example of that? Like,
essentially,
that's relevant to construction.
Yeah, let's, I guess, a step back. So for those of you who are not familiar with the word coaching as such, right? Essentially, if you think of mentoring, That's where, I come to you and I have a problem and you give me advice, and that advice helps me to solve that problem. Coaching is a little bit different in the sense that rather than giving you advice and telling you what to do, I would ask you a set of questions. I would be like, okay, where are you right now? And you would be like, well, I'm actually, this far from my goal. And I would be like, okay, what ideas do you have to achieve that goal? You would be like, well, maybe this one and maybe also that one, although that's a crazy idea. And I'll be like, okay, well, if you can do one thing until like next week, which of those would you pick and try? Um, so typically that's what executive coaches do. They don't necessarily like give you specific advice of like, oh, you have that challenge, do that. They just help you to think through things. They help you to understand what your priorities are. They help you to gain a new perspective on things. And AI coaching is essentially having a conversational agent that tries to emulate that conversation, to emulate that dialogue. So essentially, we have a chatbot that integrates into Microsoft Teams or Slack, or maybe it's a web app
Sure.
that we're also working on the voice that essentially can simulate a human coach.
So something like, hey Siri, hey Alexa, I have, 5
Mhm.
different super urgent things that came up on the project site today. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Where do I start? And it can help you
Exactly.
step through
Yeah,
that.
and rather
Yeah.
than many people imagine that when you come to a tool is like I'm overwhelmed, that the right answer is like, oh, like, take a break or whatever. But people don't want to hear that. They already know that. What's really helpful is giving them a framework that helps them to understand where they actually are. So instead, our tool would be like, oh, well, here's an Eisenhower matrix. And for those of you who've never heard of it, it's a prioritization tool, which basically divides your tasks into urgent, non-urgent, important, not important. And then you're like, okay,
Mm,
well, urgent and important, you obviously have to do right away. And then maybe the urgent but not important, maybe you can delegate, maybe you can delegate that
delegate.
to someone, right? And things that are not important and not urgent, maybe you shouldn't do them at all, right? Like maybe they're actually that waste that we discussed earlier in that lean scheme. And one thing I would just mention on the AI side as well, many people think about like generative AI right now because of
Yep.
ChatGPT and images and text. I think the beauty is that you can also analyze text really well. So through AI
Yeah.
coaching, we get like hundreds and thousands of pages of text, which is conversations between the users and the bot. And we can then use AI also to analyze that and see what are the patterns in the organization, what are the kind of systemic challenges, and so what's, for example, what we worked on with Skanska, right? And I recently delivered one of the recent reports to Mattias on like one of the projects we worked with, where it's like, okay, well, these are the common challenges that we see for your workforce, and that's what's happening. And that
Mm.
awareness is almost like that's like the HR survey that we've never had. Because they typically have their own limitations. We can only do them every so often.
Is it really anonymous? That's what everybody is always
Yeah,
wondering too.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so thanks for that. And then I think that was a really good example that at least shares a little bit more about the details about how it works. So I'm skipping around here a little bit, but I do want to bring up this question, and maybe starting with Matthias.
Mm.
So, what's the definition or the difference of the definition between leadership and authority? So that's a part one. And then as a follow-up to that question, what we're talking about here largely seems like a top-down approach. What's your take on bottom-up approaches as well? So,
Uh,
yeah.
so,
So first, leadership versus
yeah,
authority.
I think that is a very fruitful question because we got, so Sweden is a very egalitarian country, and we're not particularly interested in having someone being our managers. Actually, we don't seem to stand a manager. So sometimes we joke and say, "Don't be a manager," because people want you to be one. But then again, Sweden is also when it comes down to we sometimes work with 30 or 40 nationalities. Construction specialists coming in, so we need to take the cultural part into consideration, and we can see that like authoritarian leadership style in Sweden is not at all looking like a UK Finnish, Dima, if you don't mind, or American one. So we're very very far away from the what we call pulling the authority or the being the the all-knowing, all-deciding kind of manager. So it's very, very close how we operate when it comes down to management, which makes it really unclear and messy for people when if you come from another nationality. But seems to work kind of all right or good enough in our company. That means that like an authoritarian leadership style would be like one of the issues we've had for many years is that why are you not using your safety equipment? It's mandatory to use these safety glasses. All right. So beforehand, we had that kind of authoritarian leadership style, and we demanded people to have those. And if not, we gave them penalties if they didn't use them. We came to a certain level when it came down to using these safety goggles or safety equipment. But when we started out in a more, let's say, more agile or perhaps ADCAR way, make them aware and excited about the idea and the project, showing the benefits, the before and after pictures, for instance, then the leadership style became more of an empowering process and awareness process, and that changed instantly the way people undertook the excellent idea of using these goggles, and we went from having 14 or 15 in Sweden only, reminded 1,000 working places and constructions going on, 7,000 people connecting with 60,000 more, and we put the same emphasis on using the safety equipment in all these construction sites. And we went instantly from 1 year to another by not being authoritarian, but being more egalitarian and more constructive, or more having people to get along and come along and inviting them to try this out. So we had 14 people in average, depending on what year and how much stressful the periods were, having 14 mothers and fathers losing their eyesight on one or both of their eyes.
So
we came down to an average of 2.
Wow. Okay. So that's a very impactful transformation there. And as you were talking through that, Mattias, I wrote down on the side, leadership is empowerment. And this is a very simple way of thinking about it, but authority is enforcement. So leadership, empowerment, authority, enforcement, and you're probably going to get more mileage out of the empowerment. And then the second part of the question, so top down versus bottom up. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Because when you look at it, the more egalitarian, how do you pronounce that word?
Egalitarian.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
I say it the same way. I don't know. Maybe I'm also saying
good.
it wrong.
So if you have if you have a deep gap in your authoritarian style, I mean, we're talking about smaller gaps here, and that means that a person not being a manager can sometimes lead a manager. Are you following me there? And that would be considered to be bottom up, I guess. That the people from the bottom is raising their voice and having the managers to get along and come along according to the new idea, or perhaps not being that authoritarian in their leadership style, and not looking into the authority and that they supposed to have, and the responsibilities that they are upholding according to law or our own regulations. And so they are supposed to see that there is usage of the safety equipment, that there is quality standards upheld by the people doing the work. So if you're a smart manager and want to become a leader, it seems to be very fruitful to be kind of friendly and reliable person, and having that kind of trust being built up, and having that as your way to operate, and so just out of respect for you as a person, they want to follow the idea of using the safety equipment and uphold the quality standards.
Sure. And I like that concept of, you're building trust, and that's going to create the foundation of the team, and that's going to create, the culture that will help drive good changes for the organization. And from my experience too, with piloting and scaling technologies in large construction team or organizations, you definitely need both. You need both that grassroots support from that bottom up, who are going to be your frontline change makers in the organization, your innovation champions, who will be, the make or break if the new process, technology, whatever it is, system gets adopted. And then you also do need that leadership top-down piece to paint that vision and align the big picture parts. So that resonates with me as well. So moving on to, let's see, one of our next topics. So let's talk a little bit about, we touched on, being more friendly, being egalitarian, having emotional intelligence. And I kind of am not a super fan of like soft skills, because I think these skills are actually very, very hard to do well. But just for the sake of conversation, so how are soft skills used at your organizations? And then how do you invest and develop those?
So, if you don't mind, I'll put a few words to that part. So, we believe that the way a conversation is held by managers and leaders and employees at the construction site sort of sorts out the quality of the relationship. And the relationship part is, for everybody knowing the situational management leadership styles, there is consideration for people, there is relationship orientation, there is task orientation, and you have to undertake both to be able to maintain what you're supposed to do and change what needs to be changed to achieve different results. To respond more clearly to the question, please put it again, and I'll
Yeah.
finalize.
So how do you invest in soft skills?
Yeah.
How do you coach that or train that in your
what
employees?
we've done is we invested in soft skills by using a conversational tool called Pandatron, which fits kind of good with you being around, Dima, doesn't it? So the magic, a magician is not supposed to reveal how the magic is done by executive coaches, but you've done that, and we paid kind of a lot of money to have managers to be improved, and they spent perhaps once a week conversations with really, really good executive coaches, but at a perhaps kind of a stiff cost. And we want to use that idea and broaden the perspective for more people to have a very safe and beneficial conversation with a very, very safe and reliable chatbot. So we did. And out of that came a lot of good things. People started to be used about talking about what are their higher purposes, what gets them excited in general, what is holding them back, what are they trying to achieve, how can they go about that. So they've been empowered by this tool. We started a couple of years ago. We're still trying it out. It hasn't passed 20 years, but we're into 2 years. And there's another thing. So besides building psychological safety and trust in having that kind of conversation and seeing the benefits for themselves, invited them to use that tool. And they stated that they wanted to use the same way, asking more questions to their employees. How will you go about this? What is hindering you? So there's a really smooth way today to establish what you call soft skills. That is the key and the magic at a low cost, actually, if you compare it with other executive coaches systems in a trustful environment.
So it's really that accessibility factor that the technology is allowing you guys there. Going back to a question that came up, I think, Dima, when you were explaining a little bit more about how AI coaching works and like the text and the data that you get. And then also following up with, Matthias's explanation, like, yeah, we're getting a lot of good conversations with our team members and getting, accessible coaching. Is the data secure? Can you talk about security of that data and how that's used?
Yeah, I think if you sell to corporations, you have to start with that, I think. So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of it's security first always. I think if you think about it, if you think about conversational tools, sorry, like team collaboration tools. Um, Slack used to be very big and being like the dominant player. Microsoft came around and managed to sell it to every corporation. And part of it, of course, is bundling, but I think a big part of it was really security of Microsoft and
Security.
really
Yeah.
saying, yeah, we are a safe partner and we can provide that help. Yeah, so for us, it was kind of really starting from that. We haven't worked with military yet, but we worked with like really large clients that, Merck and, Panasonic and Mitsubishi. Skanska is like 50,000 people worldwide, and of course, there's demands where for someone they might want to have their data in their country or in their continent, which is fine. So I think it's really just about the focus of the company, like if you're aware of that, and then there's kind of inbuilt systems that are there. So for example, we on our end, we anonymize who the user is, right? Like we don't know who it even is.
Okay.
We have special agreements with our providers that can guarantee us that they will delete any data after like a month of using it. We also use tools that scrape data. So, for example, if someone would enter like the address, which I don't know why they would do that in a coaching session, but imagine they did, then we would have like tools that can delete those names or addresses or phone numbers, things like that. And by the way, on the previous session, question regarding
Hmm.
soft skills, but also
Yeah.
add that beyond kind of what we do, of course, like that's our aim and like help people there. I think beyond that, like we just had today, for example, a workshop for our management team, and I realized how like
Mm.
having someone external helps a lot, right? So to work with kind of providing you this external perspective of what's actually going on. And we are kind of doing that with our tool as well when we produce that data collection. But you can also like invite that facilitator, right? Who then suddenly sees things that you don't see because you're so immersed in your culture. You don't notice anymore how certain things are actually like,
Yeah.
not okay
Yeah.
or could be worked upon. No.
Yeah. That bird's eye view of, I guess, unrelated third party, right? So you're getting
And it
pretty
starts
much
with the
an
management.
unbiased
Right.
take.
I
Yeah.
would say that like whoever you are, doesn't matter how high up you are, of course, like everyone contributes. So like also like how to develop it in your organization, start with yourself. Like
Right. Yeah.
if you go to training, so you watch educational videos or journal, whatever it
Yep.
is. Um,
Start with yourself, that self-reflection, which is a good tie into my next question too. So oftentimes, like especially in construction industry, it's just a mile a minute. Nobody's really taking time to sit down and write their thoughts out and journal, like, here's where I personally want to improve, all that often. So how how do you promote that skill or, any thoughts on how to prioritize or make it a bit easier to have that mindset, right? It's really a mindset that we're trying to promote of continuous improvement.
I could
Um,
tell, I could
yeah.
tell what we've done so far and what we're looking forward to do.
Yeah.
If that's all right, because I received a report here last week from all the coaching sessions that we've held. And these are on an is an overview picture of what is supporting and what is hindering, what kind of hindrances do people experience when they talk about how to achieve their goals and how to get people to get along and come along and achieve results. So there is really good things. Their skills, their communication abilities, their leaders are great in assisting them to navigate the quality of their work. But there are also hindrances, and this is don't tell our competitors, but we're ahead now because we're looking into here. We're looking into here what are hindering our top managers. It's hundreds of them here in Sweden has tried this out. So there are three things coming up, and that is so clear to us that we need to address this swiftly, fast, agile, and with good leadership and management. Change management is needed here because they say time management almost 45%, 45% says time management is so challenging. I'm undertaking too many tasks,
Yeah,
and I have too many obligations, and I do them all, and I don't seem to be happy about any of those. So my time management stresses me out. And thirdly, the well-being and the communication. The time for solid, good conversations is just not there. So we need to address that. And so we need to find time for time management, clear instructions and following up and reinforcing the right way to do things. And one is have time to recover during the day so that you sleep really good during the night. Because good night sleep is really good when it comes down to reducing accidents and having a good life. So we're into quality of life here. So I'm really keen on how to bring this forward. But these are the things.
and I think go ahead, Dima.
I just wanted to quickly add that. So I run a company with like 15 employees. I'm also doing a PhD when I can. So like on a personal front, and then also I see like what our users say in terms of like what they benefit from the most. And I think it's when we talk about time management, essentially it's prioritization. Like what is important? And I think that's something that every person needs to develop. Like when people are overwhelmed, yeah, I mean, part of it is like, yeah, like there's just like too much. But when there is too much, the question is what's primary? Like what are the things that are going to give you 20x the results? Like what are the couple of things you really have to focus on? Yeah, I think that's really the paramount skill. So when we say like make time, that essentially means prioritize and kind of review what's actually important to you.
So I took notes of like two concepts. So from your response, Mattias, it's really about the data. So I think we all know, like, yeah, we're pretty constrained for time in construction. That's kind of a given across the board. But without having the data and the information to back that up, it's hard to make a case to say, okay, here's exactly where we need to focus our efforts on with our teams. So that data piece that you're gathering is leading to another level of empowerment with making that positive change. And then from your response, Dima, I just wrote down, let it go for things that aren't like shouldn't be at the top of your list, right? So there are always things. I think a lot of us in the industry tend to be overachievers. We want to deliver the best projects. We want to have everything on time, on budget, the perfect thing for the client. And some things just don't particularly contribute to those positive outcomes and can be let go. So to your point, again, that prioritization exercise of knowing, okay, here's what's actually important and being able to work through that. So we're in the last few-ish minutes here of our conversation. So are there any thoughts, specific points that either of you want to bring up before we wrap for today?
Yeah, I would just to finalize that a killer for good communication and conversations is stress. Stress is a killer for change management as well. And if we want to undertake this, we need to make prioritizations and first of all, assisting the people in charge for different parts or management and help these guys and managers to become really, really trustworthy leaders and have people to get along when it comes down to things like improving safety and quality, having recovery put in on a daily basis when it fits the schedule, so that we don't, because accidents is really, really bad for quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and motivation is really good for quality. So we need to have people. And so there are tools now assisting us.
Okay. And then any last thoughts, Dima, for the discussion today?
I would just add that I think we need more leaders and HR leaders like Matthias who are taking bold, innovative steps and really try to reimagine how we do HR, how we do leadership. I feel a little bit like we have this culture of, almost like this doesn't matter. And it's like we say culture, it's strategy for breakfast, but we don't really act that way. And of course, I don't like blame anyone. Understandably, it's really hard to measure. It doesn't always deliver results, but I think it doesn't mean that we should stop trying. And I think that's really where the unlock is. And considering like everything that's going on in the world, with the wars, with polarization, I think this is actually like the skill, the single skill that we should get better at. Like it's essentially about how we coordinate and what we value. And I think we argue a lot about like left versus right, but maybe it's actually not left versus right, but just going up, so to say. Like, what if we can think of growth and like self-reflection and wisdom and emotional intelligence? Those are like universally good things. It doesn't matter, are you on the left or are you on the right?
Right.
If you're more emotionally intelligent, you're more likely to agree.
Yeah. I totally agree. And then last question for you both. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to reach out? Is it LinkedIn or somewhere else?
It's LinkedIn, yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, probably same for me. Yeah, feel free to check out our website, pandatron.ai. But for me personally, I should be quite responsive there. So if you have any extra questions, like feel free to reach out.
Yeah,
we're gonna answer them.
There's a couple of comments and questions that we didn't quite get to. So thank you to our audience for all of the engagement, the participation. Thank you, speakers, for contributing your insights and experience. Very interesting to hear about some of the things you shared. I will follow up later with a few links on the LinkedIn page with the recording, with some resources to some of the things that we talked about here today. And then that's it for our conversation today. So thank you and take care and have a good holiday season for everybody out there as well.
Bye now. Thank you very much.